So the things that, there are about 4 and up to 5 handouts for this. If you're watching us on YouTube, we're very happy to send these things to you. The primary goal of all of this and where we started from is the one single page that is a landscape. That is the 12 months of focus as taught by the Mei HaShiloach. This is where we started, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz, 1801 to 1854. So not all that long ago. And a lot of what he says is a very, very condensed distillation of enormous amounts of material. It's not a big book. And you open up this particular page, which is relevant to a page in the Gemara, and he did not give over this whole talk in 5 minutes, right? I'm going to guess. Have you known any rabbi who speaks for 5 minutes and sits down? Right? There isn't such a thing. We just let us go and we're talking nonstop. So the important thing is the first 2 columns, which are in bold text here on this one, the month and what he says is the focus. So what we've been doing over the last couple of sessions is going through all of these sources, the sources in the Talmud, the sources in the Sefer Yetzirah, the sources in the Zohar, that have taken us far away, but ultimately are really bringing us back to an understanding of what Rabbi Mordechai Yosef is saying in his 1 or 2 words. That for this month, join with and search for Torah. This is month number 10. This is the month of Tammuz. How does he get this? Where does he get it from? And, right, so let's go through a couple of basic things, and then I want to bring in a source that I didn't intend to bring in until today. Basic cardinal principles of what we loosely call astrology, right? Number 1, the constellations are just stars. Those things up in the sky are stars. They just line up and form a picture that sort of resembles a crab for this month or any other of the constellations that you're familiar with. No power whatsoever. They simply are a representation of the power of God controlling and working the universe. It's a means for us to understand it. Right?
And the month was a Leo, right?
Leo is July. So
No, Leo is Av.
Av. Leo is Av. You caught me. Leo is the month of Av. That is the month we are going into now, right? We are in the month of Av.
21 of
Today
Av.
is actually my birthday. It's 21st of Av.
Oh my God, Mazel Tov.
Wow.
You got to give us a bracha, Rabbi Haran.
Yeah.
Today? Yeah.
That means you take us all out for dinner afterwards, and
Shall be blessed with dinner.
give us a bracha for Hatzlacha Belimud and Brias and Nefesh and Brias Aguf. That's what we all need. Okay. So this is the month of Av, right? I'm going to agree with you on that. And Leo, the lion, right? Where does all this come from, and what does it mean in our sort of sources? We've put aside the constellation, the star, and that picture for a little bit, and we will get to it in the next couple of sessions, assuming you're all still interested and you stick with us. But the things that we're most interested in, that I want to put up front and center, is the first 2 columns on the page that says 12 months of focus, because that is really what you are supposed to be taking home from all of this. Similar to the 8 habits that we did twice over, right? There are 8 habits of highly spiritual people that come in a couple of different forms. One of them was the garments of the high priest. You put on a garment that represents something. The other was the 8 habits that Noah did in the ark. You learn all of these things, and that's like the 8 habits of highly effective people, which is a very popular book, but it has a spiritual, what we would call a religious focus. The reality, of course, is not that much of it has focus on what we would normally call as religion. None of these things are telling you to put on your tefillin every morning and daven every day. That's a given, right? Eat kosher and respect other people. That's obviously a given. But here we're talking about the focus, and this is a different approach from 8 things you're doing together to 1 thing to focus on each month of the year. So we went through last thing, third cardinal principle, Hebrew months only. We are only, exclusively and absolutely, and without any doubt, talking about only the Hebrew months of the year. You should have in front of you this 12-month focus sheet. You should have one that's called the Chai Elul worksheet, which gives you the months of the year and the verses that the Zohar assigns to the month. Right? And that's the one with like 3 pages to it, and again, it's a landscape, it goes the other way. You have a transliteration, which hopefully will make these things a bit easier to read, and a few other bits and pieces, but these are the cardinal and important things that we're at least trying to focus on. I want to try and strip away the technicalities and make this practical, not theoretical, not like deep learning, which you're welcome to do. Because going through all of these routes to get back to where we started from is my way of showing you that this is very, very nuanced stuff, that there's a lot more than just a single page in the original book that we looked at. There's a lot to think about, there are a lot of nuances, there's a lot of information, but in real practical terms, here is the month of Av. I should be working on my generic desires, my ta'avot, the things that tempt me. Okay, so I want to take us a little bit off the major texts here. And the book I have is Tikkunei Zohar. Right? You can order one of these for yourselves. Never be afraid of the Zohar. It doesn't bite. It really and truly doesn't. And it is definitely understandable on at least some level when you read it with a translation, commentary, and in this case, paraphrase. The sefer that I have here is called the Matok Midvash, Sweeter Than Honey. It is the writing and the work of Rabbi Daniel Frisch, who lived here in this holy city of Jerusalem till relatively recently. Right? He died in the last 10 or 15 years, something like that. Not a long time. It's a relatively new book. And takes away a lot of the difficulty of reading the original Aramaic. Right? If some of you have a little bit of difficulty with Hebrew, believe me, Aramaic is exponentially more difficult. Never take Aramaic grammar in college. That's a fair warning, right? He has here a piece that comes before the section. If you're interested, we're on page number 8a in the Hakdama, the introduction to the Tikkunei Zohar. And he's got here an introduction and essentially a warning to the whole issue that we've let ourselves be drawn into, and that is the permutations of God's name and the verses in the Bible that connect with them, right? Because this is what the footnote to the Mea Shiloach, what the original text we were looking at, pushed us to look at. Where did Reb Mordechai Yosef get all these points from? And his referring to and connecting them to the page in the Talmud that just talks about really weird words that pop up here and there, that didn't help a lot. Where he really did get it all from is the verse that connects with the permutation of God's name. So this is very, very, very old mysticism. This is very old Zohar. It even predates the Zohar, but it is brought down here. God's name has 4 letters. 2 of them are the same, and the rearrangements come in 12 different forms. They will either, in each of its 12 different permutations, fit into a verse in the Bible. They fit into a verse in the Bible either by forming and indicating the first letters of 4 consecutive words within that verse, or the last letters of 4 consecutive words within that verse. Right? In and of itself, this is not rocket science. This is really pretty straightforward. But the verses are very, very specific, and they don't change. The only issues that we do have over the course of time is that a couple of the verses get flipped. So that may be part of the issue with regard to how things are set up in our particular book. But again, these are technical rather than practical issues.
Can I you have here on this, which says the month of Av is Deuteronomy 27:9.
Yeah.
And you gave the quote.
Yeah.
And there's a Yud and a Hey above an A.
Yep.
When I turn this over and I look at Av, it says Isaiah 14:23.
Yeah.
Why?
So,
What's the
okay.
difference between those two?
The difference is, that here, where the one has the verses, this is the verse that comes right off the next couple of pages here in the book of the Zohar. In the month of Av, we're in Devarim, in Deuteronomy 27. Moses and the priest spoke, etc., etc. Right? That is the Ur verse. That's the absolute source verse. That connects with the permutation of God's name, and that's the source.
The permutation of God's name for that month.
For that month.
Right. So what is Isaiah 14?
The Isaiah one, where it's just a single page and it says focus on top, that is the verse that is being explained in the volume of the Talmud Rosh Hashanah 26a.
So are we saying that there is a deeper connection that needs to be investigated?
Between these two?
Yeah. Or we're not?
We're not going to touch it. It's probable there is. The reality of all of this stuff is you realize that everything is connected. Absolutely everything is connected. This is what the word Kabbalah means. This is Rav Ginsburg talking, right? That Kabbalah means not just received wisdom, but parallel, seeing the unity of everything. We'll sit down and try and figure this out at some point. But yeah, the 12-month focus, that is the verse, or in a couple of cases, one case, it's a page in the Gemara where the rabbis of the Talmud were stumped regarding what a word meant. And they heard a maid from another country who was working in the house saying this word. Or they were traveling and they heard the word said in France, in somewhere else. And, oh yeah, a light went off. That's the verse here, and that's the set of 3 words that we have here. With regard to the month of Av, it's to sweep things away. Matateh, right, which is a word that we know, but they were completely stymied by what it meant. And based on that, Reb Mordechai Yosef says, what we're dealing with in the list of focuses for month number 11, the month of Av, this month, is sweeping away all desires. And the connection to the Isaiah one is God is sweeping away the nations with the broom of destruction. It's an odd verse. It doesn't, sort of sit terribly well with the way we talk about things. But he talks about, and Reb Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz talks about, the fact that all of the nations of the world worked hard to sweep away the Jewish people at this particular time of the year. Right, 9th of Av. Not a great month in our history. Ultimately, the tables are going to be turned. And not, of course, we don't want all the nations to be destroyed, but what is being swept away and what is being pictured in the sweeping away is the negative desires and forces that each of the nations represents. Where, of course, Israel represents purity and goodness, honesty, integrity, apple pie, and all that sort of good stuff, right? Seriously, though. That's the Kabbalistic picture that we're looking at here, okay? And that's what we're going to try and get into, and hopefully go through some of these months. And at least Tammuz, Av, and Elul will come out with a picture of what we're facing and what kind of help we have that is already here, right? Because one of the fundamental thoughts that comes up when you learn all of this stuff is that God is setting you up to succeed. It's meant to work. And your failures and mistakes are not the end of the world. You're being set up for success, right? All of us have what we consider to be failures in our past, right? I have not succeeded at everything I have ever done. I have been fired from many jobs, but that's life. These are not failures. These are not failures. It was meant to happen. And ultimately, I'm being set up for the real type of success. Okay, so I want to read you a little bit of what Rav Daniel Frisch of blessed memory said as an introduction to several pages here in the Zohar where they're talking about the actual verses and the permutation of God's name and the month of the year that they refer to. He says, "Da, you got to know. All these things here in this book Tikkunei Zohar, which is the whole book, and it goes to several volumes here, they're all connected to Chochmat HaTziruf, right? Litzaref is, in this particular understanding, to put together as a permutation, right? A tzoref is to weld or to purify. The biblical term is about silver is purified by fire, and the dross burns off, right? But here it's tziruf, it's joining things together. The whole point of this, etzem chochmat tziruf hagam she'ena behechrech tziruf, it's dealing with not just the whole wisdom. He's telling you that the whole wisdom of this tziruf, this putting together of the names, is not restricted to these 4 letters. We're focusing on that here a lot, but we really are talking about 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Right? Learn Hebrew, folks. If you have a little bit of difficulty with Hebrew, talk to us. We're very happy to sit and learn. We're okay with rank beginners, and we're okay with those who want to learn the ins and outs of grammar. Okay? This whole process of combining is to do with all of the letters. And the Zohar talks about putting different letters together, recombining words. There are 22 letters. Azai Gedolah, this is very big, V'atzuma, and it's hugely profound. And the source is, earlier even than the Zohar, the Sefer Yetzirah. The book of creation is what it's called here. Yep. Revised and translated by Arya Kaplan. It is a book that will take you the rest of your life to read. There's no doubt about that. You can get in the bookstores. Putting the letters together. Here's the point. To be able to do and make something out of all of these letters, we're dealing with powerful ancient magic here, right? To borrow a Harry Potter sort of term. We're dealing with very powerful, very ancient mysticism. You gotta have an introduction. You gotta prepare yourself for this. This type of thing is not something that us ordinary folks can deal with. We cannot take the letters and combine them and change the weather. I'd like to. It would be wonderful. Make a pile of gold appear on the table, right? Knock 20 years off our age. Not possible to do. Nonetheless, such things have been possible in the past, with an enormous amount of hakdamot, of preparation, the hasagot, and understanding of all sorts of things, utenayim rabim, and many, many preconditions. You can't take these words and willy-nilly try to do something with them because you think, if I put this verse together with that verse and combine these letters and this name of God, I'm gonna, I don't know, make my wife obey me. To pick something totally at random. Harishonim shezachu, the earliest authorities who merited lahashlim atzmam, to perfect themselves, b'frishut, with separation from the physical things of this world, the tahara nifla'ah, and an amazing level of purity. More uvioter mima she'esigu b'chochma zeh zu b'nichtav. Then, firstly, you separate yourself from the things of this world. Nothing here is of any value or meaning to you. No desires, no lusts. And then, it's not just what's written here. Originally, this was presented orally. Kiblu ba'al peh mirabuteihem beKabbalah. those who succeeded in purifying themselves to a very, very high level then received orally from their teachers. And on top of this, once they had done all of that, they got a lot of siyata dishmaya. God had to decide that these individuals, or that one person, was worthy of being able to understand all of this stuff.
So what's the assistance from heaven?
Assistance from heaven, right? You purify yourself, you pull yourself out of all the desires and lusts and worries of this world. You study like crazy. You learn everything there is to be learned. Then you have teachers who will initiate you into the further level up, which is not written down anywhere. Then God sends you a light and an enlightenment. Then they did this b'kedusha, in a state of absolute purity and holiness, and they reached a connection to God that was something like prophecy, divine inspiration, including koach, strength, power, v'hasaga, and understanding, l'shidud, I think he means the shidur hateva. You can do things to affect what goes on in the world. Now,
Control nature.
control nature, right? Turn off the heat and humidity in the summer. Achein b'dorota elu. In our generations, right? This is Rabbi Frisch writing in the last couple of decades. Kim'at ein mi she'asik chochma zu. There's almost nobody who can do this. And certainly, if there is such a person, we don't know about it, and they don't show, right? Ki ne'elmu maftechot ha'chochma. The keys to the door of this wisdom are lost. And the necessary level of purity, chasera, is lacking in the world. And certainly, anyone who wants to take hold of one of these names of God, and this book is full of names of God, or one of these verses, isn't able to do it anymore. And certainly we are being warned here that we can never do any of this thing, letzorcheinu, for our own needs, right? Those who could do these things and could use these powers never did it for their own benefit. You would do something for the benefit of the nation as a whole, protect us from invaders. I think one example pops into my head, the Maharal and the mystical golem. Nothing in it for him, right? To protect other people. You got to be careful, he says. Shelo levat ot bapeh. Do not say out loud the permutations of God's name. And some of them are printed here in this book. What we have put in here in this book is because you need to learn stuff from these things. That with these verses here, with all these written out permutations of God's name, you can't do anything. We're not going to be able to make any magic. I'm sorry, folks, but this is the reality of it. But we can learn Derushim Yikarim V'Nichbadim. We can learn very important lessons. There are things to be drawn out of all of these things. And good news, the consolation prize. Through just learning this, Ya'aseh mimela hatikun hanitzrach. You need to make a tikkun on something. There's something going on in your soul level that you have to do here in this world, whatever it is. There's something that you need, and not for your own benefit, but to do with the souls and the incarnations and reincarnations that you are a part of. By learning all of these things, you're attracted to the verse, the permutation, that will actually press the right button up there in heaven. Right? And we've got a lot more to say about this, of course, as well. All right? We've been warned. Don't do this at home, children, right? But apart from that, we're being told that this is incredibly powerful stuff. We are told that there are powers in each month that have something to do with the name of God, that have something to do with this particular verse in the Torah, and that it is there. By our studying it, by our focusing on it, good things happen. If we neglect to study it, if we let it slide, then, well, there's another side to all of the forces.
When you say good things happen, we're talking about the ability to change a certain character trait in yourself that will then have rippling effects on
Absolutely.
Is that what you meant? Or?
There's a couple of other of possibilities. We're talking generally in all of the rabbis that in the Hasidic universe that write about this. Generally, we're talking about making you a better person, letting you live up to your full potential. What is it that God wants you to do here on earth right now in this incarnation? Right? Which is, you have a question.
So I heard that the Hebrew language, it used to appear differently, like the letters were different. So, like you're saying with these letters, they were able to do these magical things. So was it with the old Hebrew letters as well?
I am going to hazard a very quick guess, and which is not a safe thing to do. The earlier script was the biblical era. Okay, Rabbi Poston is rolling his eyes. Like everything else, there's an argument about these things.
But I think that it doesn't matter what the shapes of the letters were. No. At this point, we're talking about the combinations and pronouncing them, but they still sounded the same.
But like, when people are talking about all these Kabbalistic concepts, they talk about like, the Aleph is made from like, a Vav and two Yod and all that.
I'll fill you in. The letter Aleph, the letter Bet, they all are composed of other letters and of different things. And there's the upper Yud, the lower Yud, the line in the middle. All of these things have lots of references. And they're being used to show and explain a lot of different things. Here we're focusing on what am I supposed to be doing this month, right? I get up in the morning, even after several cups of coffee, I don't know what I'm doing, but I have this note that says it's the Hebrew month of Av, and I have this list that says I need to work on my general set of desires, lusts, and things that I want, right? Where does that come from and what does that mean? And that's the sort of thing that we're actually looking at, and we're trying to figure out what the verse that refers to the month of Av has to say that will tell me about all desires.
But you always have to work on that. So what's the difference?
I mean, if you look at the list, I've got all desires, I've got eating, lust for money, and then sexual lust. There is a reason why this particular month is the one month of the year where we should have a general all desires and lusts thing, and then Cheshvan is the month where we should be controlling our libido, and then Kislev is the month where we should be controlling our lust for money, and Tevet is the month where we should control our anger. These are months that are good for doing these things, and that's the basic line that I keep bringing out, that there is a line of code in the programming that underlies everything in the universe. That when these particular months come around, there's a constellation that pops up in the sky that has something to tell us. There's a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. There's a tribe of Israel. There's a stone on the Choshen, and there's the Mei HaShilach telling us, here's what you need to focus on in real practical terms.
So it's easier or harder, or both, to work on that particular
It's going to be easier. You're going to get help with your general list of lust in the month of Av. The way he set it up and the way it does seem to go, and once you get into Elul, you'll see it really does make a certain amount of sense that these things move forward. That you're going through a progression, and then the month of Elul is, you haven't succeeded, have you? God still loves you. God supports you no matter what. Keep on trying, start another year. Right? So it's a cycle, and it's a warm, fuzzy feeling at the end. And that's really what you want to come out with. right? People don't respond to being beaten up by rabbis, right? Okay, this gentleman who just walked in does, but or else insulted or embarrassed. As they say, you get more, you catch more whatever with honey than you catch more something or other with honey, right? You catch more. I don't know why I want to catch flies, but you want to get people to be happy and to be confident and to look at themselves and say, I'm not a loser, I'm not a failure. I may not be able to learn Torah very well. I may not be very successful in life. My children are delinquents, whatever it is. No, your kids are not delinquents. No, you're not a failure, right? Because that is an attitude that's out there. And there have been branches of Judaism and philosophies that have said, put yourself down. That you're nothing. You're less than nothing. And who are you to be nothing, right? To just bring back the classic jokes, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work for us today. And I don't know how well it worked in the past. I mean, you look at my parents' generation, where people were taught Torah by violence, right? They were encouraged to daven, to pray to God, by being smacked and kicked by their parents and their teachers. So if you want to stop being punished, right, or you want to avoid being deprived of food or something like that, you got to put on your tefillin in the morning. You got to daven shacharis. You got to, right? It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work for our time. And this is the great revelation of Chassidut as a whole, that it's about being happy. It's about being fulfilled, right? And we, of course, have in the background all this reincarnation stuff that is, to a certain degree, I wish I'd never learned. But it's more than interesting. It's more than interesting. When you read the book of reincarnation, or the gate of reincarnation, they're more than interesting. But it's stuff you really wish you didn't know. We're human beings. All we see and all we can really deal with is we see ourselves and we see each other as complete, integral units. I am me, you are you. My soul came down from heaven just for me, for here and now, and was reincarnated and will come back again, and it'll be the same soul. Is that the real picture? Is that what the Arizal is telling us? That's a whole other course. That's a whole other course, and that upsets the apple cart a lot. But we're people, and we exist, and we relate to ourselves and to each other as just the human beings that we see. And that's what Chassidus is focusing on. Be a good person. Live up to your potential. Be happy. Don't beat yourself up. Don't take the negative way to the best place. Because, just the parent-child thing, you can get your kid to be a good observant Jew by beating and depriving and punishing, or you can get them to be a good Jew through showing them that it's good to be a Jew. Right? Does it work all the time? Of course not. Of course not. Right? The more children you have, the more you roll the dice on these things. We all know. We all know that from the most religious families, not always the kids come out the same way. And not all of us, by contrast, were born into observant homes. So, But again, there's a reason for that. And that's where the Gilgul and the reincarnation thing comes out well. And that's the conversation between Rabbi Isaac Luria by the Ari and Rabbi Chaim Vital, his student, because he starts to explain why you have partial reincarnations, that it works. Why are you not learned or observant up to a certain point in your life? Then you're learned, observant, and then you go off for a couple of years, and then you come back. How does that happen? It's something to do with pieces of other souls traveling through you. But that's, again, just a taste. It's a taste of what there is to come, and it's not recommended for everybody. I really don't think. The books are there. You can buy them. You can download them for nothing from HebrewBooks.org. But it's the world that we're in when we open up a book of Chassidut. And everything that pretty much every Hasidic rabbi says is very, very, very heavily influenced by the Zohar. Right? Okay, so we're looking at the current month, and generally speaking, the months get put together in 2s and sometimes 3s. A rough sort of survey says the Hasidic masters put the months together in 2s. As does contemporary conventional astrology, but also 3s, and also 4s, and also 6s. So it's mix and match. Here, Tammuz and Av obviously go together very nicely because these are months of the summer, and they are months where bad things have happened. They're months that we are told in non-Kabbalistic sources like the Talmud, and in terms of halacha as well, that these are months that are not so great for Jewish people, right? But once the 15th of Av passes, then everything is wonderful. This is happy time for us. This is the time to buy lottery tickets, to go out on dates, to start new businesses, right? All that sort of good stuff. So we looked last time at Tammuz. So it's page number 3 on the one that says worksheet. And number 11 is the month of Av, where we're dealing with all desires. How do we get that to fit into the verse in Sefer Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, that says, Moses and the priests spoke to all of Israel and said, "Pay attention and listen, O Israel, this day you have become a people to the Lord your God." The emphasis is on the words hasket, pay attention, ushema, and listen, Yisrael, obvious, hayom, today. I tend to think that the verse is talking about, and you're welcome to disagree with me completely, that you have to stand up and be what a Jew is. That every day in the month of Av, you have to realize that you are a soldier in the army of God, and more specifically a soldier in the army of the God of Israel. And you are not called to go out to battle against physical enemies, but you are called to stand up and say, we are the perfect army of the soul. We are the army of the good in the universe, whereas the other nations represent the exact opposite. And that's in fact what he says here. And if you have the original sheet, which I gave you quite a while back, I've just translated for you some of what the Mei HaShiloach says, and I'm pretty sure I did translate it quite well. In the month of Av, a person must now purify himself from all desires. Each nation has its own particular desire, and when the nations will become abolished, then these forbidden or foreign desires will disappear. Right, this is what we were talking about a few minutes ago. The nations of the world represent something. Everything you see is a lesson, right? Absolutely everything you see is a lesson for you. None of you came into this room without a lesson for each other. Right? Think about that, folks. I can't tell you what it is because you have to process that, and you have to process that minus all of the stuff you see when you look at somebody else. Right? We look at different people, men look at women, women look at men, and what do we see? The lesson is not that. The lesson is much more profound, or it can be very simple, right? Everything that you see, everything that happens is an important lesson. And the nations of the world each stand for and represent something that can either be good or it can be bad. None of us are from France, right? Good. Right? Food, eating,
Wine.
the culinary arts are. I think I prefer Italian food to French, but that's simply a matter of. And I like Mexican as well. But let's say, just as a random and non-binding example, that cooking is the thing that we're supposed to learn from the French. There are positives to cooking and there are negatives to cooking. You can spend all your time cooking and preparing food. And it can just be to fill your stomach, to stop you being hungry. But then you can take a step back, and it's Thursday evening here, so we're getting ready for Shabbat. What do we say when we sit down to eat, when we get ready in the kitchen? I'm not the biggest tzaddik and the holiest person in the world, but when I take the chickens and the veggies out of the refrigerator, I start by saying L'chvod Shabbat Kodesh, that this is not just something to please my wife and her particular tastes. This is not just something I'm making to impress my guests, that I can do a Nigella recipe, right? I'm making something L'chvod Shabbat Kodesh, to be elevated, to be above the physical world, and to give us strength, and to give us a taste of pleasure and help us feel all the things that Shabbat really represent. So, if indeed the midah or the chemda, the desire or the lust of the French is cooking, then maybe what we should take from that is cooking with a purpose, cooking with a higher purpose, right? Because you can't just make food to simply stuff your face or to enjoy it. And we will, over the course of time, if you stick with us, get into quite a few different nations of the world and what it is they represent and what it is we reject, right? Because all of these forces have the double side to them. All of the things of the month have a positive side and a negative side, right? This is the month of Shmiyah, of hearing, according to the Sefer Yetzirah. Pay attention and listen, O Israel. These two fit together very, very nicely, right? And the source for this is the Sefer Yetzirah. The hearing, the constellation is all in the Sefer Yetzirah. The verse is Zohar and earlier Kabbalistic books. Pay attention and listen. Listen to what you're saying. Listen to what other people are saying. Really hear what that other person is. Look at yourself. Stand up and be counted. Because here, I'm looking at the original text from the Mea Shilach, which is where we started and where we really always want to be. This refers to the month of Av, because in the month of Av, we have to purify yourself mikol minei chemdot, from all types of desires. And every nation in the world has its chemda, right? A chemda is a desire, a thing that you want. And when these nations are destroyed and abolished, because we are in the month where the Jewish nation was almost abolished, the table will eventually be turned. Yitbatlu kol chemdot zarot. All these nations, there is a process. There is something that the Mea Shilach says that a lot of folks don't agree with. And that is, you should travel to other nations. That the whole purpose of our existence here is to go and see and interact with places and people that are totally and completely different from us, because there's something there that we have to learn. Ufaratza, right? Everything has to spread out. But he's talking about specifically engage people who are different from you, go to other countries, eat the cuisine, learn a bit of the language, see the sights, because there's something there that you can take home. The negative things that you see in any particular country, leave it there. But there's always a good side to it, right? And when we're looking at the lion, Leo, there is something negative about a lion, but there's something positive about a lion, right? A lion can be warm and cuddly if they want to, right? And all the lion has to do is show you his teeth, and you're terrified. What's the good part? What's the negative part about that? That's a whole step down the road. We have to go into a couple of the other writers to get that. I really want to keep us in the one book that really, really does try to make this easy for you. Right? Month of Av. Pay attention, listen, hear what you're saying, hear other people at a real, honest level, and become a people to God. Stand up and show yourself as the good, a representative of the good, someone who is good, and not like we theoretically posit all the other nations to be. So the last month of the year is, of course, month number 6, right? The numbers of the months are counted differently. The month of the year that comes at the end, that's next month, that's going to start in a week, is Elul, right? And that connects with verse number 25 in chapter 6 of Devarim. Utzedakah tihiyeh lanu. It's sofei tevot, it's the letters at the end of the words. Utzedakah tihiyeh lanu ki. Again, it's not the simplest lesson to tease out of all of this. It will be a merit for us when, or that, we keep and observe all the commandments before the Lord our God as He has commanded us. It will stand to our credit that we keep the commandments. We do our very best to do as many mitzvahs as we can. God will always give you the credit for having done it. There is no such thing as losing points up there in heaven. You always get to keep the points that you scored. Right? So he expresses this here in terms of a verse. It's a verse in the book of Psalms, Psalm 55. And again, it's going back to this page in the Talmud with the words they couldn't understand. Cast upon God Yahavvacha, your burden, your load, v'hu yichalkelecha, and He will sustain you. Right? That's not the verse with the permutation. That's the verse with the hard word to understand. This is the month of Elul. What this means, if you should say, Ech efshar lehitbarer b'kol eleh, how on earth am I going to purify myself in all of these 11 things? I've done this list. I started at the very beginning of the year, and I've worked on something different every month. Comes month number 12, it's coming up to Rosh Hashanah. I can't do it. I failed most of them. Cast this burden onto God and He will carry you. He will never allow a righteous person to falter. Give yourself over to God and He's going to take care of it. You cannot go into Rosh Hashanah, you cannot go into a new year saying, I have failed completely in the year so far. Right? That is a radical departure from what we're normally told. That the month of Elul is a time when we've got to say, I'm so wicked, I've done so many bad things, I've got to punish myself, I've got to try and make myself holier. You've done that. You've been a good person. You've read this book. You've learned this lesson. You've spent 11 months working on yourself. No matter how well you have done on an objective scale, you still get the merit, you still get the credit for you. Because God keeps score, and God keeps score differently from the way we keep score. You made the effort. You tried. And if you failed, maybe you were meant to fail. And that's okay. Right? And this fairly non-politically correct thing is, let's get a little bit into the Mazalot. The sign of the month of Elul is the Betula. All right? I can say the word virgin here, right? Good. the basic thought, it comes from B'nai Sassachar, is that when it comes to God, it's always your wedding night. We, the Jewish people, are always as pure and as virtuous and as loved by God as it was the very first day or the very first night. It's never, the relationship never changes as far as God is concerned. And you haven't failed and you can't fail, right? Okay. Sefer Yetzirah chapter 5. One of the earlier chapters talks about the planets. Sefer Yetzirah chapter 5 doesn't say an awful lot. The whole book doesn't say a lot. But when it gets to the months of the year, and there are also angels that go along with the months. We believe in angels. We like these things. Let's take the particular month that we happen to be in, right? And it lists 5 things. When God was creating human existence, he took the letter Tet, which pre-existed, and made it king over hearing. The thing of this month is hearing and the letter Tet. What does the shape of the letter Tet refer to?
It looks like an ear.
Actually, it looks like a womb.
Oh.
Sorry, ladies. This is not entirely politically correct or delicate, but it's a womb. It's a fertile month. The month of Av is a good month. It's a month where God is incredibly close.
Can it look like an ear and a womb? Like you said, it's hearing. I look at doesn't an ear look like a... Anybody agree with me? We've never seen a womb.
Yeah, of course we have. You didn't go with your wife to the ultrasound things and.
Of course I did.
Of course you did. You're the perfect husband, right? Seriously.
And Lamaze.
Oh yeah, I remember Lamaze. Yeah. God took this. It says this 12 times over. God took the letter Tet, and it's only the letters that have one form. None of the doubles, none of the final letters. Made it king over hearing, bound a crown to it. So hearing and the letter Tet are going to be intimately connected. They're going to be tied together. And the binding with the crown is that it's elevated, that it's the good part of hearing, not the bad part of hearing. Because look at the story of the 12 spies. People listened to what they said. Damaged the faculty of hearing. With them formed Leo in the universe. Tells you nothing other than that, right? Which we sort of tend to explain, or I try to tend to explain as that which we see as Leo, right? Because there's no lion up there. The month Av, the left kidney in the soul. That's already a contradiction in terms. How does your soul have a kidney? Male and female, right? So you have to go into the next stage, which is about maybe 2 classes on, where we'll be in the month of Elul, and we'll take a look at what each of these things spells out to be. What does Tet refer to? What is hearing about? What is the Leo about? What does Av mean? The months come with us from Babylon. Right? The Hebrew months and the names as we know them are not there until the final books of the Hebrew Bible. We were learning Zechariah this morning, and it was the month of Shvat. That's totally different. Most of the Tanakh, most of the Hebrew Bible, it's month number 1, month number 2, or the spring month or something like that. Right? What are kidneys? Your kidneys are things that give you advice. Kidneys are a source of wisdom. What's left as opposed to right? Apologies to the left-handed. Things on the left are the not so good. Things on the right are the good. Sorry. There has to be a meaning to everything. And, trying to not insult everyone is totally impossible. Right? You can't sanitize these texts and bring them to a point where nobody is offended by them, because maybe that's part of the point as well. It's a message and a lesson, and it's a learning process. You take this and then you start looking at the charts. Well, just a minute, there are other versions of the Sefer Yetzirah. It's a book that has been kept hidden for a very, very long time. And only comes out and into print in the Middle Ages. What's the first edition comes out in, I mean, I can look it up if you're really interested, something like the year 1200. I'm not going to look out all the.
Well, how does it get the attribution to Adam Avinu?
It does. It does.
I think the Bahir also.
The Bahir is
that's
what
Adam Rishon.
he says. It's Adam.
I don't know. I don't remember.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible.
I have a copy.
We're looking at printed editions from the 16th century, just from the beginning of the era of printing. Manuscripts, I don't know.
I mean, this was found, the sacred, I mean, like, what's...
The Sefer Yetzirah comes to us.
I think the Talmud also mentions it already.
Yeah. It comes to us through, the manuscripts go back to the 13th century. British Museum manuscript MS 736 is earliest text of this version. It dates from the 13th century. Similarly, Paris, similarly a couple of others. Then Hebrew Union College, British Museum has 14th century. The ones that we're looking at mostly come to us through the text that is given to us by either the Gaon of Vilna, Eliyahu the Gaon of Vilna, the Gra, and that is the one that's translated here, and the one that contrasts with it is an earlier commentary that includes a text that is somewhat different, and that is Rav Saadia Gaon. Right? And when did Rav Saadia Gaon live?
1100s.
11th century, something like that, right? So the Gaon of Vilna lived in the...
16th.
Right, so we're looking at maybe a 500-year difference between the two, but they're the two basic texts that we have, and when you get into the one who starts to reconcile them is the Shem Shmuel, or Shmuel Misachachav, where he will say, for example, the month of Av, what are the things that go with the month of Av? The thing of the body is hearing, right? We just said that, Shmi'ah. The version of Saadia Gaon says taste. The version of the Gaon is left kidney. The version of Saadia Gaon is right kidney.
Huh. It's not that far off.
It's not that far off.
So it's kidney.
And the Shem Shmuel and one or two others are going to try and reconcile.
They had a different tradition, but
They
they still had basically the same tradition with a few nuances.
Okay, you want to take a couple other different examples?
I think the Saadia Gaon might even be much earlier. Some of the Gaonic period was like...
Was when the 1000s and 900s.
800, 900, 1000.
Yeah, I'm really not very good with any of these sort of dates and things.
But I mean,
Saadia Gaon, here we go, 891 to 941. So he lived he lived at the very 10th century, right?
so he had access to the Sefer Yetzirah?
He had his copy of the Sefer Yetzirah that he put his commentary to in manuscript, handwritten, which you can download from HebrewBooks.org. It's published 100 or more years ago, but it's right there. They have different texts, and they're substantially different on these points. From the Gaon of Vilna saying this is a month of hearing and listening, to Rav Saadia saying this is a month of taste. Then you move on to the Ramak of Moshe Cordovero. He says right kidney and anger. Right? Different again. Some of the differences can be expressed by saying, well, someone made a mistake somewhere. But the differences are really quite substantial. And...
I wouldn't say that. I would say the opposite.
Go on.
No, I'm saying if you have how many words in the text and you have just a few...
You have a couple of hundred words in the text. It's one of the shortest books there is.
Okay, so you have a couple hundred words and there's a few words that are
So the Sefer Yetzirah is only a couple hundred words?
The Sefer, he tells you at the beginning, the Sefer Yetzirah has a very limited
Yeah,
number.
it's really cryptic.
What language was it written in?
Hebrew. Hebrew. Yeah, first commentaries on this book were written in the 10th century. So how'd you go on? Right? And then the question is, it's 1,300 words long. The Gra version has 1,800 words.
Huge difference.
Yeah, but not an awful lot. And the things that you have to realize is we're not entirely certain what it is. Is this meant to be a guide to meditation? Is this meant to actually tell us something? Is it something to help us focus our spiritual and mental powers?
Well, the Morale of Pratt used it as a basis for supposedly creating a goal, right?
Yacholiot. I don't know.
Concepts.
Okay, your question about Abraham. Rav Sadia Gaon in his commentary says that it is attributed to Abraham. Similarly, the Zohar says Abraham wrote it. Some of the oldest manuscripts begin, the letters of Abraham our fathers, which is called the Sefer Yetzirah. This does not mean, however, that the entire book as we have it now was written by Abraham. Sadia explains, or Sadia Gaon says, the basic principles were first taught by Abraham, but were established and assembled into a book later on. That is an interesting way of looking at a lot of different things, and especially the Zohar. It was written, it was started by the people that we believe it was started by, but later editions have been accrued from the school of. The interesting sort of parallel is, we did a course a while back on Sefer Yeshayahu, right? Everyone's favorite book in the Hebrew Bible, right? Isaiah is not something we read at our leisure, but in the world as a whole, in the world of critical commentaries on Isaiah, until fairly recently they said there was Isaiah number 1, Isaiah number 2, Isaiah number 3, right? They've completely changed their mind. The scholarly world of the universities now says there was a school of the prophet Isaiah. So it's a thought that we're getting here, that there's great pure wisdom that was built on and developed by subsequent generations. But the attribution is to Abraham. And that fits in. And that fits in with one of the things you brought up earlier, that how does this wisdom get out into the world? It's a point that is made by our friend Rabbi Label Wolf, right? He's someone you should read and bring in as a guest speaker as well. Wonderful, wonderful guy. That when Abraham sends his other wife and their children away, right? It's Genesis, right? You're nodding your head, it's familiar. Abraham and parts company with Hagar, and with their children, and he gives them gifts. What are the gifts that he gives them? And where do they go to? They go to the east, and the gifts that he gives them are mysticism, astrology, this type of wisdom for which the Far East is today remarkably well known, right? Whereas for us, this sort of stuff is a very small minority. It's there in some very, very, very well-known and very famous rabbis' books, but we skip over those chapters because it doesn't really interest us. But I found that these are some of the most valuable things to learn, because it's not really about just understanding the Parsha. It's not really about just understanding, well, this is a month where bad things happened and the 15th of Elul is when things turn around, but this is about me. And this is about my need to be sensitive to what's going on in the environment, because I'm not separate from the world, right? Last thought, absolutely last thought. We're on overtime, and you guys get extra points for sticking with us. The Sefer is called Resise Lila, droplets of the night, or Tzadok HaKohen Lublin, one of the really, really great masters of the Hasidic world. He said that God looked at the Torah and made everything. And it's a midrash, a well-known midrash, very first in Bereshit Rabbah. But what does that mean? That if God made everything that we see using the Torah as a blueprint, then we are connected to absolutely everything. I was created with the Torah as a blueprint. My cup of tea was created with the Torah as a blueprint.
It's a quantum physics type of quantity.
Yeah, but it means, and what Reb Tzadok is saying in that particular Torah there, it's the very, very first one in the book, is that you're never alone. You find yourself traveling. You find yourself isolated for some reason. Right? You're homesick, and everyone else has gone out somewhere. You can connect yourself to other people and to other creatures and even to other things by opening up a book of Torah, reading a couple of lines. That's the power of Torah. That's the power that is our birthright as Jews and in general as spiritual human beings. And that's the sort of thing we're hoping for as we go into the month of Elul, right? We're going to pick up our spirituality, pick up our learning, and head towards a good happy life.